Hello, my name is Winston Wallace. Yesterday was my birthday, December 1st. Uh, Today, of course, is December 2nd. It's year 2010. My good friend Carissa, my niece, is always asking me to tell her about the old days, tell her about when I was young, tell my story. So I thought I would tell it to Carissa briefly, my story. Probably wouldn't be too interesting to most people, but I don't know. I guess some people are interested in, depending on your time frame, your reference, where you're at in life, what you call the old days. I know people that were born in 1990 think of the old days as the 90s, and the 80s, those born in the 80s or 70s think of those years as being the old days. Well, I was born in 1942, so to me, the old days are obviously the 40s, 50s, 60s, even the 70s now, or the years have passed by. Anyway, to get back to my story, I was born December 1st, 1942, in Gorman, Texas. That's a little town in north central Texas in Eastland County. Used to be known as the peanut capital of the Southwest. Uh, my dad was a tenant farmer, sharecropper, if you will. In other words, he didn't have his own land. He farmed someone else's land. In return for that privilege, he gave 1/4 of the proceeds of his crop to the landowner. So he was a tenant farmer most of my all my growing up years, and the crop he raised back there in Texas was peanuts. Anyway, I was born in 1941. I'm sorry, 1942. The war had just started about a year previous to that. December 7th, 1941, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. So the war was on. The war was going full blast when I was born. We lived out in the country in a little house. I don't have too many memories of it, but basically we had no running water. The only heat we had, I believe, was from a fireplace, wood fireplace. We had no toilet, no no amenities whatsoever. It was an old wooden shack, basically, but it was our home. And there, that place was where my oldest brother Robert was born. My second brother Joe was born. I was born there, and I believe all of us brothers, except the youngest Jerry, was born on that place. We call it Lewis Sanders' place. Lewis Sanders was the fellow who owned that place, owned the property, owned the old house and the peanut land my dad farmed. I don't recall too much about those years. We moved when I was almost turning 5 to what we call a Parks place, probably 10 miles away out in the country, to probably a house that was even worse than the previous house. Uh, Once again, we had no running water inside. There was a pump outside that ran continually for water that went to an oil well some distance away. So we did have access to water outside. I remember my mom had an old kerosene stove, and there again we had a fireplace where we burned wood. And once that fire went out, there was no heat. On those cold winter nights, it was cold. It was probably colder inside than it was outside. And I have a lot of happy memories about those places, really. About that place, what we call the Parks place. Uh, I can remember our mom on a cold winter night heating up an iron like you would iron with back in those days. We didn't have electric iron. They had an iron like you would put on the stove to get it hot. You would iron with that. And she would take that iron or irons and maybe wrap up some cloth in it, and on a cold winter night, she would put it against our feet for, if you will, a foot warmer. I recall that. That was we had a wonderful mom, and I can remember, like, on the cold mornings, like I said, we had no inside toilet at all. We'd have to go outside and go to the bathroom, and she would give us a little tin can as us little kids to pee in, and she would take it outside and dump it. And I thought that was kind of special. Uh, I started school in that place, the Parks place, 1948. All the roads in those days were unpaved. They were dirt road, gravel road. I can still see the old school bus coming in the distance, and us kids, probably Robert first, the oldest, and we were all strung out running for the bus. Seems like we're almost late every morning. You could see the bus probably coming down the road in the distance, maybe a mile away. We'd all be running across that peanut field catching it. The bus stop was probably gosh, quarter, half mile away. Seemed like quite a ways when you're a little kid, and I can recall my mom making us back in those days. Didn't have too many store-bought clothes. She usually bought her pants, but shirts and coats. She was a great seamstress. She had a lot of talent. She could do anything, everything. My mom. She would make us shirts out of flour sacks that you could buy in town, or feed sacks. In those days, a lot of the feed sacks and flour sacks had cloth made of all kinds of different designs of cloth. You could make clothes out of it, which a lot of folks did in those days. And I can remember I didn't particularly like the designs. They were, to me, they looked like a girl's design. A lot of times it'd be flowers and stuff like that. But I did wear the shirts to school because I didn't have too much choice on that. But I recall one time she made me a coat from from a lady, a grown lady coat. She cut it up and made me a little coat, and it was gray. And to me, it just looked too girly. She made my brother Joe a green coat that looked even more girly. Anyway, I was, I guess, stupid and ashamed to wear my coat to town. I mean, to the school. So I would wear it to the bus stop there where our mailbox was on the old dirt road, and I would take it off on the coldest of winter days and stuff it in the mailbox and go to school without a coat, without a jacket. And when the school day was over and the bus driver dropped us back off, I would get it back out of the mailbox and, act like I wore it to school. And that was really stupid. I shame myself for doing something like that. My mother spent a lot of time doing the best she could with what she had. We were very poor in those days. We went barefooted most of the time. Like till sixth or seventh grade, we didn't have no shoes or wear any shoes to school. And the only time you wear shoes is be in the cold of winter where you just really couldn't hardly stand anymore. And most of the time those shoes would be just hand-me-downs or just holes in the bottom. I remember I had one pair of shoes I had to put some cardboard in to wear to school. So we were very poor, but I guess didn't really realize how poor we were. We were happy. We were healthy. We ate real good. We raised our own pigs, our own cows. We had fresh milk. We had a great garden. Mama was a great cook and canner. Back in those days, the ladies would can, and we had all kinds of good food. We had a lot of fresh food, of course, during that growing season. I can remember those fresh onions and fresh tomatoes and fried okra. Man, fried okra. Oh, Jesus. I still yearn for fried okra and just black-eyed peas. And uh, every morning, Mama would make the greatest breakfast, just standard. I mean, it would be a full-bore breakfast. It'd be biscuits and gravy and sausage and eggs and hot coffee or chocolate. And I mean, we ate so good. And we always had a lot of meat to eat. We grew up too on, like most folks did back in those days, pinto beans, which I still love today, red beans, pinto beans, cornbread, fried potatoes. God, I bet we had fried potatoes at least once a day. And I still love fried potatoes. Uh, anyway, I'm going to call this chapter 1, and I'm going to let you go for now. Uh, I'll be getting back to you a little soon, and we'll go to chapter 2.